any decision that we make is based on the corpus of information that we have. And our ability to make sound and timely decisions functions largely on the amount of information we have as our baseline. And the more information that you have on the baseline, the more options that you can consider when making decisions.
This is Journey to Point B, where you can find success stories of people who have achieved the same goals you're striving for. I'm your host, Lucia Csoma, and it's my hope that these stories will provide motivation for your own journey to Point B. Chris, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lucia. It's a pleasure to be here.
Same. So happy to have you on the show. I'm very excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. It's been one of my goals to read more, but somehow it's not working that well. And I know that in the conversation that I had with you, you reached something that a lot of us strive for. Read more, and not read more, but read a lot. 50 books a year, about 200 books in the past 4 years. How did it all start, Chris?
Well, to sort of begin with, this was not something that I had just done my whole life. This was a pretty recent change in my life, and so I'll give you a little bit of background to help sort of paint a picture of how we got to this point. And so I'm 51 this year, and so as I was approaching 50, I was getting concerned that I wasn't meeting objectives that I had wanted to meet. And so it was sort of an introspective time in my life. And I really thought about things from the lens of someday is never going to come. So if I'm not actively doing the things that I want to do to get the outcomes that I want to have, I'm not going to get there by chance. And so one of those things was there's a lot of knowledge that's out there that I don't have in my head. And so I want all of that knowledge in my head. I want to be a better husband, a better father, a better employee, a better professor, right? A better friend, like all of those things. And there's all of this knowledge out there that's going to help me get that. I just need to get it in my head. And so I've been an active athlete most of my life, starting in high school sports all the way up to my time in the military. And so I thought of it in terms of going to the gym, right? I go to the gym every day. I set time aside, and that's the time that I go. And I don't let anything else sort of intrude on that time. And so I thought, well, why don't I do the same thing for reading? And so I had to do a bit of an assessment. When is my best time? Some people are evening people, some people are morning people. After 13 years of military service, I'm a morning person, whether I like it or not. And so I said, okay, so I'm going to give up an hour's worth of sleep because it's just an hour. It's not that big of a deal. And so I started getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would read from 5 to 6. I would get my coffee. I'd get in a comfortable chair, and that was just my goal. And something I learned is that reading is like a skill, like any other skill. And the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the faster you can do it, and the more natural it becomes. And so I started off reading, maybe 2 books a month, and I've gotten to the point now, fast forward, 4 years, and I can read, 4 books a month. And so I'm hitting that 50 to 60 books a year mark, which has really been, it's gotten me to a point where a lot of that information then starts to permeate into your thought process and, the way you look at things. So that is a very long answer to that's how it all began and kind of where I'm at today.
Yeah. And Chris, you said that you started with 2 books a month. And then now you're at 4, maybe more a month. How did you get there?
Yep. So the first book that I read sort of on this journey is a book called Ultra Learning by Scott Young. And the reason I started there is I wanted to learn how to read, because as adults, most of us stop, really reading in like 5th or 6th grade, and we do pattern recognition and word recognition. That's why, like on Facebook and LinkedIn, like you'll see this jumble of misspelled words, and you can still work through them because your brain isn't really reading them, it's recognizing patterns. And so I wanted to learn as an adult, how does my brain actually work? Like, how do I read? How do I retain things? What's the difference between memory retention and memory recall? And so I kind of started there just so I had a baseline of understanding of how does this machine up here going to work with all the stuff that I'm about to give it. And so that was really helpful because not only did it help me understand, sort of the neuroscience behind, the learning process as adults, but it helped me guide my decisions about which books to read. And so if you think of them as sort of like a tree, you can read one thing and then you get skills that allow you to read 3 other things. And those 3 other things unlock skills to let you read 5 other things. And so I looked at, skills I wanted to have or knowledge I wanted to have and then kind of worked my way backwards. And so as time went on, I don't memorize everything I read, right? It's not quite possible, but I have a very sophisticated system of a pen and a piece of paper that I fold into a bookmark, and I take notes when I write, and I take notes in the margins, and then I put that on my little bookmark, and then I stick my bookmark back in, and it's a 8.5 by 11, folded up, and sometimes I have 2 or 3. But I remember what book something was in, but I have no idea where it was. But so I pull out my little bookmark and I find, okay, well, that's what I wanted to remember. And so as time went on, like I said, it's a skill, and I just got better at it, and I got faster. And I wanted to add more time in. So where originally I allocated an hour, in the evenings when I would watch TV, I'm like, well, this kind of seems like wasted time. So I kicked, Netflix and Amazon out and started reading instead. And so I added another hour in. So it's nothing mind blowing, right? 2 hours a day. I gave up 1 hour sleep, gave up 1 hour at TV, and I was able to do a whole lot more than I had ever thought I was able to do.
What I know about goal formation or habit formation is that it's a process, and there are a lot of things that get in the way, all habits getting in the way.
Right.
What helped you stay on track and get to even let go of Netflix and Amazon and prefer to read?
So it's interesting, sort of in parallel to, taking on my reading project, and this is all during COVID as well. I wanted to learn how to play the guitar. Like, I've always been an avid music lover. But I know I don't look like it, but I'm a complete metalhead. So I love Metallica and Iron Maiden and Van Halen and Led Zeppelin and these really, sort of meaty rock bands. And so around the same time, I started playing guitar. And so, you get calluses on your fingers and your hands hurt, and, anything you play, it sounds like, a cat, screeching, and it's just, it was just miserable. And then you fast forward and you get to a point now when I can almost play Master of Puppets by Metallica end to end. But it took me, 2.5 years to get to the point where I could do that. And so with reading, it was no different, right? I looked at the objective, which, again, when I started off with was I want that knowledge in my head. And the reason I want it in my head, and I was able to articulate those reasons, was I want to be better at these things. So when I started reading about finance, it's not that I'm, incredibly interested in finance. So, reading Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations was not a labor of love. It's that I wanted to understand finance better so that I could understand business better, so that I could apply my craft as a cybersecurity professional more effectively, because I knew the financial aspects of that business. And so it was really rooted in, here's the results I want. And to get those results, I sort of have to work backwards and develop the habits and get into the muscle memory that allows me to do the things I need to do to get the results I want. So just like playing guitar, you have to learn chords, you have to learn finger movement, you have to learn picking and speed picking and economy picking to do the things you want to do, like, like play these Metallica songs. And so they're very, very similar. And so when I say reading is a skill, I genuinely mean that. Over time, you just get better at it and more effective and more efficient.
What is something that surprised you the most that you learned in this process?
So there's a couple of things. First of all, I'm I'm a sociology and psychology junkie. I really enjoy how the human brain works, how thought processes work, how do we form opinions, how do we relinquish opinions, how do we communicate efficiently and effectively, and what do facial expressions mean, and what do anchoring positions mean in body positions and things like that. So I think kind of first and foremost, I figured out that I have a true love for the human condition and learning as much about that as I can. And I think the second most surprising thing was that I could do it at all. I mean, I've never been a really fast reader. And I was one of those people that I would read a page and I would have to stop and go, I have no idea what I just read. I have to go back to the top of the page and I have to reread it. That's not unusual, and it's not an indication of where you can go. It's just, sort of a marker of where you're at. And so, as I've said multiple times, you get better at it. And I still do that, right? I was reading a book this morning and thinking, I have no idea what that paragraph just said. I got to go back and do it again. And so in reading over again, right, you sort of, solidify that context in your mind, but I do that far less frequently than I used to. So it's not a complete elimination, but it's more of a mitigation. And so those things really surprised me.
What were some of the barriers that you found along the way that would get in the way for you to stick with this new habit?
Where I saw the biggest, sort of barrier was in how do I remember everything I read? So like when you read 50 books in a year, that's a lot. Right? That's a lot of pages. It's a lot of concepts. It's a lot of things to remember. And so I used to think if I didn't memorize everything that I was reading, then I was like, well, what's the point in reading it? Because I can't recall it anyways. And so that tripped me up for a while. And it really made me question the entire process and thinking, is this really something that I want to do, need to do? Am I wasting my time? Because I don't remember everything anyways. And then I sort of changed my thinking on that. And as I began to understand that memory recall is far more important than the ability to regurgitate something I had read. So if I just know I read that in a book somewhere, which book was it? I can go get that and I can pull that back. That became a much more reasonable outcome as opposed to kind of holding myself to this unrealistic expectation that I was just going to memorize everything and be able to, spew it back at a moment's notice. And that's where, honestly, my super complex system of writing things down became really valuable, is I could pull out those pieces of paper and go, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking of. And then it would jog that memory. And the reason why I found that to be so important is when I thought about the decision-making process, again, going back to my nerding out over neuroscience, any decision that we make is based on the corpus of information that we have. And our ability to make sound and timely decisions functions largely on the amount of information we have as our baseline, right? And the more information that you have on the baseline, the more options that you can consider when making decisions. And so as I started to grow that baseline of information, I started realizing the decisions I was making, whether at work or whether at home or whether playing guitar or whatever, became better. And I noticed that the outcomes were better. And it sort of made me think, well, why is this happening? And I went back to the beginning of this process and learned that the wider that my baseline of knowledge was, the more I had to draw from. And so the decisions I was making were more inclusive of different disciplines of knowledge and of learning. And so that was really interesting to see. And now I get to reap the results of that. And so, it's not been an easy journey, but it's absolutely been worth it.
I can relate with the second point, like how will I capture all this information? I go to conferences or I read books or I take classes. And at one point I'm thinking, how will I remember all this information? But what I find is that this information just comes at the right moment, at the right time, in the right conversation. It just comes.
Well, and that's a great point. Because I didn't have that skill, before. So big surprise, I read a book about it. And I remember the book is called Unlimited Memory by Kevin Horsley. And he's a memorization expert. And apparently there's like competitions, like how many characters of pi can you recite and things like that. So again, memory is a skill, and there are things that you can do and exercises that you can go through that can help you remember things better. And so I read that book early on as well so that I could recall the things I was thinking, and going through some exercises of, well, how do I make sure I remember this? Okay, now I go through one of my exercises, and that's cemented a bit more. And this goes into, how do we remember things as humans? Like, how is it that, students, I teach at Oklahoma State University, how can my students memorize the lyrics to every song that they've heard, but they can't, talk about what I lectured in, last class period? And it has to do with what's the emotional connection and what is the visual connection. And there's all of these other things that you can do to create those points. It forms in a very specific way. And if you can learn the way your brain will establish those connections, it makes it so much easier to go, okay, I'm an auditory learner, so I need to put music to this. I'm a visual learner. I need to picture, some sort of imagery to help me remember this. And so all of those things play out to help you recall all of those things, whether it's a conference or a podcast or a book or, any other way that you take in information.
Chris, as you were exposed with this knowledge from 200 books only in the past 4 years, what is the most personal transformation that happened as a result of this?
It boils down to like your perspective on knowledge. So I think of it a bit like an inverted pyramid, where the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, which then drives me to learn more, because then the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And it's this sort of, never ending, pyramid that's going outward. And then you look down and you realize all the things that you've learned in the process. And so I think what's been most beneficial for me and has, I don't know, changed the way that I viewed turning 50, which was a bit of an existential crisis. I don't know, how many of our listeners are kind of at that point in their lives, but when you hit these, these chronological, inflection points, right? And so it causes you to think about, what am I doing with my life? How did I get here, et cetera? It invigorated me to say, look, I've got, 50 more years. I can learn almost everything there is to know. And so personally, my interest in different subjects and my desire to want to learn about, anything and everything that interests me, and that I can, right? I can read 3 or 4 books about something and have a pretty good understanding of how it works. And that's just been, sort of transformational for me. And it makes me look at the next 50 years of my life and really get excited. Not that I'm at the end of the journey, but man, I'm at a great point in the journey where I've got the ability now to take in so much more information and have a rich future, over the next half a century.
Mm-hmm. So, Chris, I understand that you have 2 boys? Or 2 kids?
I have a boy and a girl. I have one of each.
Okay, one of each. What is a book that you would pay each of them $100 to read it?
Okay, what book would I pay each of my children $100 to read? So my daughter would be Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Dr. Travis Bradberry. Probably one of the most underutilized skills that I've seen in the business world is emotional intelligence. And so she's a business major at Oklahoma State. She's actually in my class next semester, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I would like to see her EQ, continue to rise. She's pretty emotionally intelligent right now, but I just don't think she has the lexicon to be able to address things in as much detail as I would like to see her do. And my son, I'd love to see him read How to Win Friends and Influence People. I know that is a classic, written in the 1920s by Dale Carnegie, and really helping him to understand the influence that he has on others around him and how to make that influence meaningful. He is a very social creature. He's got lots of friends and he's good at it, but I want him to be intentional about how he uses that influence. And I think that'd be a great foundational book for him to read.
It's wonderful. I know, I'm familiar with those books. I actually started incentivizing our kids to read more. I have some of these books that I want them to read, and I think it's such a good investment in them. So I picked 3 books that I read, and not everybody reads these books. So I'm just curious, in all these books that you've read, have you read Open by Andre Agassi?
I have not. No.
Okay, put it on the list.
Okay.
How about Leadership and Self-Deception?
Yes, I have that. That's actually behind me. I don't know if you can see it on the shelf over there, but that's over there.
It's one of my favorite. And how about Project Hail Mary? I know that's nonfiction.
I haven't
Fiction.
read that one either.
Sorry. Okay. One of my favorite fiction books. I rarely read fiction, but it's one of my favorites. I was just curious if I can find at least one book, and I found 2 books that were not on your list. So
no, that's great. I love getting recommendations and seeing what books are meaningful to other people and then putting those on the list for sure. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure. If you ever read them, I would love to hear your opinion.
Absolutely.
I struggle with reading. I have a stack of books, or I have a lot of books downloaded on my Kindle, and then I start reading 5 at the same time. Some I listen in the car, some I scan, and I then find it hard to go and finish all of them. So now I have like 5 books open. Some are like from 25 to 75% read. I'm curious, what would be your advice for someone that is struggling to get started with this good habit?
So I have a friend who can juggle multiple books, right? I'm not one of those people. So I typically, my book that I read in the morning is a business book because that's when I find that my brain is the most active. So it's my business books, it's my psychology books, right? It's some sort of, self-development, sort of reading. And then when I read in the evenings, that's my entertainment. So that's when I read fiction or, just something that I want to learn for fun. And so for me, I can't do multiple books at once because I'm too scatterbrained. I need a smaller number to be able to focus on. So I'd say if that's you and you're struggling to get through those, I would say pick a smaller number and just kind of power through that book. But I think kind of the underlying principle is just consistency. It's like going to the gym. Like you have to go every day. And so just pick a time. It doesn't matter what time of day, but just pick a time and just do it every single day at that time. And just know it's going to be, a bit up and down. Some days you're going to want to do it. Some days you're not going to want to do it. Some days you're going to read and go, I got nothing out of this. And some days you're going to have a page of notes. And so just know that it's a journey. It's not a straight line, and there's going to be ups and downs, and that's okay as long as you stick with it and continue every day.
What's one book that you tend to recommend the most?
I think probably Adam Grant's Think Again. I don't know if you've read that book yet or not, but it is a fantastic book that covers when you formulate an opinion about something, how do you then change that opinion? And even deep-seated opinions based on background or religious upbringing or things like that. It doesn't mean because you've held that opinion for a long time, or maybe your parents held it, or your parents' parents, it doesn't mean that it's right. And so having the ability to really pull back and analyze your beliefs and realize, well, I don't actually know why I believe this. I believe this because my parents did. I don't know that that's reflective of my belief system. And so life-changing book. So if anyone needs a book to start on, Adam Grant's Think Again, absolutely phenomenal.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Chris, what's one goal that you're working towards right now?
I hit my 50 book mark. And so this year I want to read 65. And so I'm right on track at the halfway point. I'd read 32 books, this year so far. And so I'm on that path to read 65 books this year. So that's my challenge there. And then, in my guitar challenge, I'm trying to learn Hotel California by the Eagles, both the acoustic intro and the electric solo at the end. So that's one of my goals, is to be able to play, some of these iconic songs end to end. And I've learned it's the same thing. It's every day in front of my guitar for, 30, 45 minutes and figuring out, getting that muscle memory so that my fingers just know where to go. And it's very similar with reading. As you go through it, your brain just knows where to go. So those are my short-term goals.
If anyone from the listeners would like to get in touch with you or learn more about what you're doing, what would be the best way for them to learn more about you?
So email me for sure. You can reach me at my personal email is probably best, and it's C like Charlie, E like Echo, and then my last name, Pogue, Pogue, @gmail.com. And I'm very happy to answer any questions. Also, if you want to email me at school, I'm christopher.pogue@okstate.edu. And so I check both of those emails pretty regularly. So if anyone would love to get a hold of me, please use one of those two mediums, and I promise I'll get back to you as quickly as I can.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Chris. Some things that stood out to me, just some great reminders that practice makes perfect, that a solution to establishing a good habit, it can be simple. It's just making sure that you come at it again and again and again, that you're regular and consistent about it. And I love the recommendation of your book, and I will put it on my list.
And sort of the last thing I did, and I don't recommend anyone do this, so please don't take this as my recommendation for you to run out and do this. But I got it tattooed on my arm, and so I don't know if you saw this tattoo, but it's a stack of books, and it says, "I have lived 1,000 lives." It's a quote by George R.R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones. And so I would feel pretty silly if I had books tattooed on my arm and didn't have a good story to tell about, yes, I read a lot and here's why. So it was a way for me to kind of force myself to go and read, so that if someone sees this, they don't think I'm an idiot for getting something tattooed that has no meaning in my life. Don't run out and get a tattoo, but it worked for me.
Okay, I'll tell you my version. I say my deadlines out loud. Even if someone doesn't ask me, when are you going to have that done? I always say it, or most of the time, and that keeps me accountable. So if you're not ready to get a tattoo, at least make your deadlines public.
Yeah, it's true.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, of course.
I have a favor to ask you. If you resonated with anything in this episode, I'm asking you to please subscribe to this channel. This will help me bring you more guests with more inspirational stories to help you on your journey to point B.